Real Talk USA.
It's my house, come on, turn it up.
The hour where the U.S. mission to the African Union comes to you through Afro FM 105.3 to highlight the United States partnership in Africa. Current issues will be discussed. Guests will engage on a variety of topics, ranging from politics to jazz. Co-hosted by Eyuel Solomon of Afro FM and Chris Meade of USAU. The show will air every Thursday. Feel free to participate by sending messages to the USAU social media sites www.usau.usmission.gov or www.facebook.com/USAU and follow USAU on twitter.com/USAU.
Just relax. Welcome to my house.
Real Talk USA.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.
Hello everyone, this is our weekly show Real Talk USA on 105.3 Afro FM, and it's me, Eyuel, with Chris Meade here in our studio.
Hello everyone. How are you? I'm good. I'm great. I'm great. I hope you're good. Yeah.
I'm good. So today we have special guests in our studio, right?
We do have special guests in our studio today. I'd like to introduce our guests, our audience, to Mayor Victoria Jackson-Stanley, who is the first female and first African-American mayor of Cambridge, Maryland. We also have Kisha Petticolas and Dion Banks, who are co-founders of the Eastern Shore Network for Change. So I'd like to welcome you both to Ethiopia. And you told me in the van that this is your first time here. How are you finding it?
Yes, amazing.
It's eye-opening.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And the potential here is just awesome.
Yeah, so this is my third time to Africa, but my first time to Ethiopia, and it's like my first visit.
Where were you in Africa before?
South Africa.
South Africa? Yeah. Okay. Very different.
And I've had this umbilical cord feel for Ethiopia. I just wanted to come here because this felt like the place I needed to be. And I'm just very grateful to all of you for inviting me here. I felt very welcome, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today as well as the continuation of our visit. So thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Mayor, thank you. We were talking, and what brings you to Ethiopia? What brings you all to Ethiopia? I understand that you came. You have would like to have a dialogue. You began a dialogue in your hometown on change, on history and change, and bringing people together. And I think that's what we'd like to talk about today. Yeah.
Yes. It's fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Gotcha. So I am born and raised in Cambridge, Maryland, and I was born in 1972, which is 5 years after a tragic event that happened in Cambridge that actually have us here today. Mm-hmm. I'll start back with the event that happened. So in 1967, during the time of the Civil Rights Movement, that year was also known as the Long Hot Summer of 1967. And several communities all throughout the United States were on fire due to civil unrest. And Cambridge, Maryland was also one of those towns. So in July of 1967, the heart of the African American community was devastated by a fire that burnt down a ton of businesses, the central heart of the community, which led to 50 years of a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of people neglecting what happened and not wanting to talk about what happened. So in 2012, 45 years past that, Kisha Petticolas and I meet, thanks to the mayor, because Kisha was running her campaign for mayor, the second campaign. And I actually met Kisha that year. Mm-hmm. So during that year, I also had an opportunity to be a part of what's called Leadership Maryland. And Leadership Maryland is a program where they select 52 people out of the state per year. And they actually take you around for about a year, and you tackle issues from social injustice to pregnancy to education to political issues and all that different kind of stuff. So while I'm traveling around the state that year, I'm learning about all of these things that I could actually start addressing to make our state better. And at the same time, I'm running around with Kisha as a campaign manager. I'm learning about what is it that our constituents need to make our city better, to make sure people are getting what they need under the leadership of our mayor. So during that time, we identified a lot of underlying issues in the city of Cambridge, But one of the things that stood out to us was race. There were a lot of issues with race. So after we successfully kicked butt and won the campaign for the mayor, we decided shortly after to have a conversation called 45 Years After the Fire. And how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been was the tagline. Because we knew it was an issue, but nobody wanted to talk about it. I don't care if you were white. I don't care if you were black. No one wanted to touch this taboo topic of race because it was just such a sensitive topic. So one Thursday, Kisha and I said we're going to have a meeting. We put a call out there, and over 150 people show up to Bethel Church, which is a very significant place to have this meeting because, number one, it's a safe place because it's a church. We want people to make sure they're in a safe environment to be super expressive and say how they feel, and we meet them in a safe place. But Kisha and I didn't realize it was the very first conversation that was ever had in the city until we got halfway through the conversation. So we invited a panelist to come speak, but we didn't know who was going to really show up until they actually walked through the door because it was just that sensitive. Some of our panelists actually walked in and sat in back of the church because they still weren't comfortable enough to come and talk about this in front of everyone. Mm-hmm. So halfway through the conversation, people got raw, emotions got raw, people were crying, people were kind of getting a little abrupt. And we realized then that it was the very first public conversation that had ever taken place in the city of Cambridge. So from then we started strategizing, and we realized that we had to do something to, number one, reclaim our narrative, to tell the true story of what happened, and to let people know that Cambridge wasn't as what was portrayed in reports called Maryland's Mississippi.
And Mississippi is known in our country as the state with the worst everything.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's how they reported Maryland, Cambridge, Maryland being. So we wanted to make sure we seize this opportunity in a way that would be respectful, in a way that would be honest, and tell this story on a platform that would go all over the world. So we decided to start planning for an event that would happen in 2017 for the 50th anniversary.
I think the mayor should probably talk about the event that was so damaging to our community so everyone understands that this wasn't just a fire. Yeah. Right, Mayor?
You're right. It wasn't just a fire. It was almost the result of frustration and tension that was continually building in our community. In the 60s, there were demonstrations in Cambridge, all over the country, but in Cambridge, where I lived, there were demonstrations of all kinds. There was violence. Some of the white merchants who would not serve the black patrons who wanted to go into their establishment were very physically abusive to the demonstrators. But people kept demonstrating, kept the conversation going that we want equal rights in not just public accommodations. We didn't really need the public accommodations in Cambridge in the white district because we had our own. But there were problems in the sense that education was the key trigger for a lot of the problems that they were seeing. I was a young girl, but I heard the conversation of the adults. Gloria Richardson was a fixture in my life because, as Ms. Petticolas and Mr. Banks said, my father, Frederick Douglass Jackson Jr., got to throw his name out there, was one of her lieutenants. He was tall, he was big, he was vocal.
Could you explain who this person is that you're talking about?
Gloria Richardson.
Yes.
Gloria Richardson was a native of Cambridge, Maryland, and her roots are very deep in our community. Her father and her grandfather were important fixtures politically and socially in Cambridge. If I recall, her grandfather, Maynard Richardson, I think I've just destroyed his last, Sinclair. It's a very big name, big meaning, very recognizable name in our community. Her grandfather served on the city council back in the 1800s. It was unheard of that black people had elected positions in a community. We've had black people for as long as I can remember on city council, on the board of education, the library board, prominent positions in our community also had a black person in a seat. So Gloria, being the granddaughter of someone like that, had a very self-confident air about her. She went to Howard University, graduate there, so she was an educated black woman and mother. And I want to project the mother image because her role in the civil rights movement, from my perspective, was because she wanted better for her children. And she took the lead because this is what I heard her saying during the time, that no one else was doing it and something had to be done. My father was her lieutenant because he had the same mindset that something had to be done for the children. Public accommodations was not the real issue, but housing was. Our housing stock was really quite poor, and our educational system was second class. So Gloria Richardson took it upon herself to start talking to people, start beating the drum that something had to be done for the community. She began this movement not by herself. There were lots of people behind her, but she was the single force, if you will. She was the woman, if I may say again, the woman out front, doing what had to be done. I think we spoke about this in the car, but I don't know if Ms. Petticolas said that she was also a contributor to getting public housing together, the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee. They know all of these acronyms. I just talk about what was actually happening. But she met with Robert Kennedy, who was the brother to John F. Kennedy, one of our former presidents, to really look at what was needed. She was bold, and she was determined that things were going to be better in her community for the children. And that really was the spark that, and I'm going to use this word deliberately, the fire that started to smolder and burn in Cambridge. So as we move forward from the early 60s up to 1967, Gloria had done her work. She had moved on and was living in New York in 1967. But there was still that unrest, that tension that was going on. There were still unresolved issues.
Now, let me ask this question. So it's familiar history to us because we grew up in the United States, but what was the community like? So why you mentioned in the card there were two separate communities in Cambridge.
Yes.
There was a white Cambridge community, and black Cambridge community.
And we melded when we had to. When my mother needed to buy a dress for something, we would go on Ray Street to buy that dress. But otherwise, our money stayed on Pine Street. We had the restaurants, and our churches were located there. My dentist, the doctors, the pharmacy. So we were really much a self-sustained community, and we just interacted when we had to. Our schools were segregated, and our teachers were top-notch, but our materials were not. So when it got to the point that we could recognize that we are not getting our equal share, our fair share, though Pine Street was alive and bubbling and all kinds of things were happening, the adults and the young people recognized that there was still that disparaging environment that we had to do something about. And as the children, the teenagers were, galvanizing themselves under the leadership of those who were still really working our civil rights issue, it started to smolder a little bit after Gloria left. But there was still that anxiety, that tension that was still in the civil rights movement. Plus, we were seeing what was going on around our world, Baltimore, Washington, LA. They were all having their issues. So when 1967 just popped up with us, we saw that though we were separate and we were fine with our separatism, there was still more that we felt we had to gain. And there was this symbolic old school. Pine Street School was the name of the school. And it was a symbol of the lack of equal supplies and equal education for our black children. I was a kid, I don't know. I was at my house sort of watching and listening to what was going on Pine Street that fateful night in July. But I do remember there was a lot of tension in the community that led up to July 27th. And the feeling in the community really dealt with, we don't want to take this anymore. We are going to have a symbolic movement. And H. Rap Brown was invited to Cambridge to talk to this growing crowd of discontent in our community.
The civil rights leader.
The civil rights leader. And he was out of California, if I recall his heritage. He was not from Cambridge. Let the record go forth here in Ethiopia. H. Rap Brown is not from Cambridge, Maryland.
And he had nothing to do with our movement.
And he had nothing. He was brought in to just talk to the group of young people that had assembled for a rally, for a speech. But his words incited something within the crowd. He was famous to have been quoted to say, after his speech, at the ending of the speech, if Cambridge won't come around, burn Cambridge to the ground.
Right.
That's what he was quoted as saying. I don't believe he meant for us to actively burn our community down. I don't believe that. But those in the crowd heard those words, and later that evening, after he had left the crowd and after the crowd had dispersed, someone took it upon themselves to do a symbolic burning of that elementary school. The school was vacant. It was no longer used as a site for education of the children, but whoever it was, and I know that Kisha and Dion know the identity, but they won't even tell me who the person was. I have my suspicions like everyone, but they were angry. And the anger sparked a symbolic gesture or an action that created a fire, that created a flame in our community. And I was about 13, I remember, and I heard gunshots being, popped around the community. I heard the gunfire. My father, Fred Jackson, said, "Oh gosh, something's going on Pine Street," because he knew about the rally. So he's dashing out of the house, and I'm watching and listening. And I can remember now seeing the flames jumping over the rooftops 2 blocks away. And Cambridge in the black community was Pine Street. Mm-hmm. Pine Street was considered Cambridge to the black community. So when Pine Street started to burn, it was technically 2 blocks. Mm-hmm. But they were important blocks in the black community because they housed the doctor's office and the restaurants and everything that was recognizable for our community. It was gone. The next day, I remember walking out of my house past the National Guards, who were still stationed almost every corner around my community, and walking on Pine Street, and it was not the place I remembered growing up. It was gone, smoldering, and the fire leaped across the wires. It started at the school, started blazing, and it got out of control because the fire department could not come. Also, urban legend, they wanted to go in, but people were on rooftops firing guns at the fire department, so they would not come in. The other, which sounds more factual, that the all-white fire department did not want to go into the black community to put out the fire. And as Kisha Petticolas said earlier, they could have controlled that fire a lot better than it would have been controlled had they had gone in and taken their big hoses. The black community tried to save the buildings. Fred Jackson, again, was working with people with buckets of water trying to put the fire out, but of course it wouldn't work. The fire was out of control. It was a hot summer, dry day, so it was too late.
So the heart of the black community in Cambridge is literally burned to the ground.
The heart of the commerce of it, the entertainment district.
Well, we're looking at a picture right now of that, and that's Pine Street.
Mm-hmm. Pine Street back in the day after the fire, maybe a couple of days. An aerial view, I think this is from the Sun paper out of Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And imagine a little girl, 13, walking through her community. Mm-hmm. That's the school. And now this is gone. Mm-hmm. And this is H. Rap Brown talking to the people, the crowd. I'm just repeating what I'm looking at on Mr. Banks's screen. This was the night that is etched on everybody's brain. If you're old enough to remember that fire, you're going to remember where you were and its impact on your life. I was at home safe, being a good kid. My mom and dad said, "Stay home." So I stayed home, but I'm looking at the fire. My sister, who's younger and much more adventurous than me, was on Pine Street with the crowd. If you know my sister, you know that she's nothing like me. She's beautiful, she's brilliant, but she's the radical of the family. But if you recall that fire, you will remember where you were and how you felt. I was just crushed.
So, I mean, this is obviously a huge event, and but Mr. Banks, you mentioned earlier that until you guys started organizing a discussion around this, there was no public discussion. How could a community burn to the ground and people don't talk about it?
Well, The fire itself was a stark reality of our community. It had just never been addressed. So you have to remember that during the national movement for civil rights, during the 50s and the 60s, during that early time, Cambridge was fine. We got thrown into the national movement in the late 50s due to economics and employment, not necessarily because we were fighting for voting rights like the rest of the country was. So for us, the town of Cambridge had about 10,000 people during the times of the civil rights movement. In Cambridge, Maryland, we were known as a manufacturing town, and we were also known as being canning industry, vegetables, and farming town. During the time of the World War I and World War II, Phillips Packing Company employed about 10,000 people in a town of 10,000 people. So everyone had a job, white, black, all the neighboring cities, states, everyone would come to Cambridge to be employed by Phillips Packing Company. So one of the reasons why we had such a self-sustaining community in the African-American part of Cambridge is because we were making our own money to keep our town afloat, right? So what happened was during, after World War II, and Phillips Packing Company now relying heavily on government contracts. When the world wars were over, there was no more contracts, so the jobs left. So during that time, there were 4 people in charge of our town called the Four Horsemen, which were 4 white men who practically controlled any type of economic investment, any type of city investment. And during that time, they had banked all their money in on these manufacturing companies and the water. So they kind of created this town that they wanted to be, and blocked everything else that was coming in. Because again, one of our most valuable things during that time was our labor force. You can't come in and develop something that you're going to bring more jobs, and we can't even employ. We can't fill the holes for these people. So fast forwarding to after about 1954, 1955, when the rations left. When jobs left, there was a movement to protect white jobs versus black jobs. And during
the company closed down.
The company started to close. They weren't completely closed. But during the time of them starting to close down, there was a movement to protect the white jobs versus the black jobs, which then threw the unemployment rate for the African American community in the city of Cambridge over 70%. So then the African Americans in the community started to feel disenfranchised. You can't pay your bills. Education was becoming an issue, and there was no jobs. No one was hiring you. And then healthcare became an issue. So then from the late 50s up into 1960, 1961, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which Brett Brown was a part of, SNCC, were going into towns like they were all over the country. And again, that speech that Rat Brown gave was the exact same speech he gave all over for SNCC. So again, he didn't incite a riot. That's just what he said everywhere. He had no responsibility for the fire or whatever that happened here. But moving forward, people just started getting angry when SNCC came in. When SNCC came in, Gloria Richardson then later formed CNAC in 1961, which was Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee, based on her involvement with SNCC. So,
and people didn't talk about it because it was painful. The community, the white community felt like the black community burned its own community down, and some black people felt like white people either started the fire or just allowed the black community to burn down. And so it was painful. It was something that folks didn't want to talk about. It was a taboo topic. And it just got swept under the rug. It was the elephant in the room. And so when we did get together, when Dion and I got together in 2012, we kind of stumbled upon this fact.
45 years later.
45 years later. And so that...
You didn't form to address the fire. You found each other independently.
We found each other serendipitously through the mayor's second campaign. At the time when we decided to have the public conversation, I think Dion might have already touched on this, we weren't truly aware of the fact that no one had ever come together to talk about it. And so once we became aware, we decided that it was something we needed to address repetitively. And our first conversation was 45 years after the fire, and Dion and I are both somewhat media savvy, and we knew that at the 50-year anniversary of the Long Hot Summer, there was going to be national attention paid to what had happened 50 years ago. And we wanted to capitalize on that attention, to reclaim the narrative of our city, to portray our city in a positive light, and to move forward from the injury that the community had suffered. And so we put together a 4-day event called Reflections on Pine. Pine Street being, again, the heart of the African American community. And we brought together a number of stakeholders in our community. The city, we brought together some folks from the county tourism, the library, the historical society, the police, the fire department, scholars from across the state to come together to talk about what had happened, to put the real story out there, to allow people, again, another safe opportunity to talk about what happened, how they felt, what they thought, and how we might move forward. So it was 4 days, and during that time, we not only had a public conversation on race, we had a scholarly presentation at the library by 2 authors. We had a pictorial exhibit that told the story in pictures. We had a gala dinner where we celebrated 4 people in our community that refused to accept the status quo, and that would be Harriet Tubman, the famous slave who not only freed herself but 300 more on the Underground Railroad. She is from our community. We celebrated Gloria Richardson, who you've already heard about. We celebrated the mayor's father, Fred Jackson, and we also celebrated the mayor as being the first female and first African American community. We unveiled a mural that highlighted the African American experience in our town, which was quite controversial, still is. It is one of the first things you see when you come into town, but it highlights Gloria and Harriet and other notable either places or people in our community.
What you mentioned, why is it controversial?
Because there are still white people in our community that consider Harriet Tubman as a thief, because she stole property, which would be black people as slaves. There are people that think that she should not be celebrated. There are people that believe that Gloria Richardson incited violence. There are people that still believe that our contributions and our experiences are not worthy to be discussed.
And it's also controversial because it's the first thing you see
when you come
into the city of Cambridge. Now, Cambridge, by census, is 48% African American, 46% Caucasian or white, and then whatever the rest of the percentage is of other Hispanic.
And
so the majority of the people that live and vote in the city of Cambridge are African American. There are some people that disagree with how important that is significantly. But there are those that look at this as an affront to them because they are not African American. And to this day, I still get a couple of little snippets of discontent. It's like, why is the first thing that we see in Cambridge are black people?
Well, and the thing is, it's really not. When you come across the bridge into Cambridge, our visitor center is very prominent, and on the wall of the visitor center is a picture of watermen, which is a huge part of our community, the life on the water and fishing and crabbing and that sort of thing. So that is the first image you see. But people have decided that this image of African Americans is the first thing you see because they don't like it. You know, we are very proud of it, but a lot of people don't like it. And might I add that this was part of a mural project for our county, and all of the others celebrate life in Dorchester County and highlight either nature kind of pictures or white people.
Kisha,
this
could
is
you
the only-
describe what's on this mural for the
maybe
audience?
Excuse me. So
I'm sorry?
maybe if the audience would like to visit this, can they? Is there a website that they can
Certainly.
see what
Yes.
we're talking about? Okay.
www.esncambridgemd.com.
Right.
Again.
Yep. www.esncambridgemd.com.
Right, that's our website, and you can see an image of this mural. You can also see a copy of our walking tour that we did as a part of the Reflections on Pine project. It is a tour that it's self-guided, and it highlights places that are important to the African American experience and the civil rights movement in our community. But also during Reflections on Pine, we had a I think I mentioned the community conversation on race. It was moderated by Pulitzer Prize winner Professor E.R. Shipp. So we were very honored to have her. And on the Sunday, we had a unity walk that took our walkers on Race Street, which was the heart of the white community, and circle around onto Pine Street, which was the heart of the it still is the heart of the African American community. And just so people understand, these two streets are parallel streets, and they are separated by a block. And so imagine one town, two communities separated by a block. So this unity walk was significant because of the geography that we covered. And then later that Sunday morning, we had a community church service at Bethel Church, which is a historic African American church on Pine Street and the heart of the civil rights movement for us, where we invited everyone to come and worship on that Sunday. And the church was packed, and it was racially and culturally diverse, and so it was quite moving. We had all of our elected officials, just about all of our elected officials there, and everyone that you can imagine who hold prominent positions in our town and our county decided to come out on that Sunday. So it was quite the moving experience. And we did all of this to start the healing process in our community. We did it so that we can discuss the root of the issue that has been holding our community back, and that we can begin to move forward about the things that plague us, like our education system being subpar, about the fact that we don't have the jobs that we should have in our community. Why is that, right? The fact that our housing stock still has serious problems and tend to be substandard in the African American community. And if I live in a house that's falling apart and have black mold in it, it should not be acceptable to you as a white person because we live in the same community, right? If my kids go to the same school that your kids go to, and the school is a substandard, we should all agree that that's a problem. If I can't find a job and pay my taxes, I am not being productive to the community, and you should care about that. And if you can't find a job, I should care about that, because we're all in the same community, right? And so our focus at this point is to create change. Take positive steps to galvanize people together around issues that everybody should care about and probably do. And we're not going to agree on how to fix things, but if we can all agree that these are issues that we can come together about, then we can start to make change. We this year have started to tackle the issue of education. Dion nor I are experts in education, so we don't know how to fix the education system. I have no idea. But we know that if you can galvanize people to agree that we need to fix something, that something might happen. So on the first day of school, our community has a lot of children who don't have fathers at home. And so on the first day of school, we decided to galvanize men in our community, African American, white, Hispanic, whatever, to come out to one specific elementary school and welcome the kids back to school. And there was an excitement in the air, and the men were just so excited to be asked to do this. And not all of them, many of them did not have children in school, not at this school or any school in the community, but they came out to welcome these kids back to school. The kids were excited. It got press coverage, so now the town is like, wow, we're for our children. And a lot of those men then went on to volunteer to help kids with reading groups in the school. They volunteer an hour once or twice a week to sit and read with kids. So it started this kind of momentum in our community. And then just recently we celebrated Gloria Richardson Day, which was designated last year by the governor, which was pretty special because you don't get a day designated in our state unless you're dead. And so we pulled some strings to make that happen.
She's still
for her.
alive.
She's
Yes.
still alive. She is
alive.
95 years old and is the only living person to have a day designated for her in the state of Maryland. So we just celebrated that day.
It's kind of cool, I to be selfish, turn this back to me, but I've often thought, like, I think people should have a pre-funeral so that they can see how many people actually like them and come out and respect. I'm sorry. It was
let me step back for a second. During our reflections on Pine, we had a conversation with Gloria Richardson, and she wanted it to be small and intimate. She didn't want to talk to a whole bunch of people, and so we assured her there'd be no more than 100 people there. Well, then the tickets sold out, and it was a free event. Everything was free except our gala dinner, and so the Hyatt, which it was a partner with us, and the Hyatt Hotel, and did a lot of things for us. They gave us a bigger room so we could sell more tickets or give out more tickets. And so it ended up being about 350 people in the room, and she was only supposed to talk for an hour. And when she walked in the room, she was amazed. And she ended up talking for 2 hours. Now, understand that the last time she came home publicly was in the 80s, and she in 1986, and she was arrested for an old outstanding warrant.
Wow.
So the community she had worked so hard for, to fight for equal rights for everybody, arrested her when she came back home in 86. So to come back in 2017 and have this kind of warm welcome was quite amazing for her.
Right.
But we just celebrated Gloria Richardson Day last weekend on February 10th. It's actually February 11th. And celebrated a man in our community named Ray Washington, who has started a marching band for an elementary school, which is the only one in the state of Maryland. They are very good.
Yes, they are.
And we celebrated him because he has given our children a different perspective on life. He has given them opportunities that they never would have had. He's given them discipline, he has given them drive, and he has given them hope. And so we celebrated him, and we celebrated a young man who has been accepted to a program, a STEM program, science, technology, engineering, and math program, young African-American boy, and that is a major achievement in our community. And so we celebrated him and gave him scholarship money to be able to attend that program. And the Elks Lodge, which is a fraternal organization in the heart of our community, stepped up and gave the remainder of the money that this child needed to go to the program. So that too got press coverage, and it is generating a kind of support and excitement for all of our children in the community. And our next step will be to do a book drive so that our kids who have trouble reading will sustain themselves over the summer. So similar to Toys for Tots in our country, which is a program with the police and the Marines where they collect toys for children in need, in our town we will be collecting books, and we'll start that probably in April, to collect books to give to our children to read over the summer. Yes, we do have a library, but there's always issues on getting there, right? And so if you have books at home, you're more likely to read during the summer and to not fall behind, so that you're ready for the next school year to start. So these are the kinds of things that we can do to try and impact our education system. So once people start being invested in the way that we're asking them to be invested, in things that people can do, they'll start paying more attention. They'll start galvanizing and saying, wait a minute, why is it that we have to have a book drive? Why are our kids falling behind? Why is our education system not as good as it should be? And then we gather those people and go to the school board. We gather those people and go to city council and say, all right, we got a problem here and we want you to fix it.
Yeah.
So it's not our job to fix. It's we've taken our job as galvanizing people.
Right. And it's about accountability. So one thing that we've learned is we have a lot of great people in our community, both black and white. We have a lot of people that care and a lot of people who want to do great things for our kids and for our city. But it's about positioning. Like, you can't sit on the other side of town and write these checks because, you know, you're writing these checks because it makes you feel good, because you think you're making a difference. You have no idea where this money's going. So, you know, I call it the iceberg syndrome. You have people who are sitting up in high offices who are looking down at what they perceive to be the problem, which is the tip of the iceberg. But underneath the water, it's so much bigger. And we are the people that's underneath the water. We're at the doors. We're in people's houses. We're at the schools advocating for kids. So what we're trying to do right now is, number one, hold people accountable, but also make them understand the realities of these people's situation, our people's situations, regardless of what the situation is. So what we do is we collectively bring all these people together in one room, and we do our research. We understand what the issues are. We understand what your key strengths are. So once you get to the room, providing you get there, we'll tell you where we think you need to focus to help us collectively address these issues.
Right.
And it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm listening to what you guys are doing. Like, you're focusing on the issues that unite people,
Right.
Yes.
rather than, you know, like, it could be very easy, and probably this did happen after the fire, that people, it's an us versus them, it's a zero-sum game, their win is my loss, and, you know, people are put into conflict with each other.
Right.
And it
Yes.
sounds like you use the fire, which is very polarizing, to actually create a conversation that brought people together
Right.
from different perspectives.
To wake
Right.
up. Yep.
And you know, it's amazing what you guys are doing.
Well,
Because
thank
we
you.
live in an age of where people are siloed. You know,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it feels like it's so in some ways getting worse in the United States with social media. Is nothing bad about social media, but the way that it's being used. You know, to just listen to people that you want to listen to,
Right.
and not have a real conversation.
Right.
With people that are different, or that have a
Right.
different perspective. That's what you're doing is invaluable. Sounds to me.
Right. But the beauty of it all is, like Kisha said earlier, is when we identify those things that we all have the same concerns about education, about housing. And once you start to collectively work and have these conversations, you actually see that you're not so different. You know what I mean? And then what happens is, you know, we all want to win. So then when you have that one conversation where you leave, like, you can now make a difference in the lives of your children, the lives of other children, or change a system that seems subpar, that one win is now a step in the right direction as a team, because collectively, you've just done something.
Right.
So collectively, what else can we do? And then, oh, by the way, is your kid in band? What do you like to do? What's the last book you read?
Right.
So now you create this environment where you start to have these other relationships that build off of the commonalities.
Right.
Of you know, so it's just a beautiful thing. It's like a flower. It's going to continue to grow and blossom.
Right.
How do you build the trust to get people to open up and talk about things without? I mean, there must be a lot of fear at the beginning. There must have been a lot of fear where people wouldn't want to share what it was that they were thinking about this or that. How do you get people to open up so you actually know what people are thinking, so then you can address what their issues are?
So, personal experience for Kisha and I. When you have a topic so taboo that's been allowed to be told and told and retold for 45 or 50 years, the untruth now becomes the truth. And you have people who perpetuate this untruth because you have the people in the community who we call the people with the loudest voice but with the wrong message. So you have these pockets of people who just have very loud voices but have the wrong message. So in 40, 50 years, the community has entrusted these people with where they get their information, whether it's from things going on in the city in terms of politics, to what's going on in your community. Why is the city building sidewalks with our money when they should be investing in this, not knowing that the city did a great job of getting all the CDBG funds, community block and investment funds, community development funds for free to help our community. But because they're getting this message from these people, they believe it to be factual. So what Kisha and I did, we knew we had to address this group because this group was the group. So we actually got this trust of the community by actually defaming everything that they said. You know, this is the truth. This is the reality. We are becoming the voice of reason, or the voice of truth, and actually just challenging everything that they say with facts. So we had to kind of dismantle that group, and we had to become the voice of reasoning by meeting the people where they are, at their houses, where they hang out, where they socialize, having our own type of events to engage them, to not only address a particular topic. Like we've had town hall meetings when we had mass shootings in our community, in our country, and we brought our community together to say, okay, you know, before this happens here, this is what we're not going to do. So we partner with the city, we partner with the chief of police, we bring everybody under one roof to have the conversations that would prevent activities like that in our community. So through that, we create trust with our people, and then allow them to kind of feed off of what we're doing, and then hopefully support us as we move forward.
The other thing is, the place that we do it is important. And for us, all of our events where it was a community conversation have been in a church. People are not going to get but so rowdy in a church, right? People are not going to use language that we don't want them to use in a church. And so there's a safety in the church. And so when we have these tough conversations, we've decided to do them in a church. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's going to honor their church, right? But so far they have. And it's worked for us. And so I think you have to be, when you're deciding to have tough conversations in your community, you have to be strategic about where you have it, about who's leading the conversation, and about having people who can redirect the conversation when it takes an unproductive turn. And we've been very fortunate to not have anything turn ugly and unproductive for us. And part of the reason is that before we even came together, we were both involved in the community. So folks knew his work, folks knew my work, both in the community and our real day jobs. And so there was a level of trust that we had garnered that we weren't aware that we had really done. And so when we said, hey, everybody come together, people came.
Everybody came.
Everybody came. And for me, I'm still very shocked and honored and humbled by the fact that people come and they are willing to talk when we ask them to.
Do you have do you have opponents?
Of course.
Who are they, and what animates them? Bringing people together bringing people together to address common problems. One could see how that people that have vested interest in keeping things the way they are would oppose that, right? So who are your not enemies, adversaries, and how do you deal with them?
Well, Dion and I have been very fortunate in that the opponents never come directly to us. The mayor probably has had conversations with them. Other people that are close to us have had conversations with them, but they never come directly to us. And so it's like we've been blessed to be in some sort of bubble, right? So that it's not dampening our spirit, but they are out there, and you see them in social media. They actively work behind the scenes to try to dismantle things or disrupt things. But it's important to note that, and you'll see this on our website, there's a picture of a group of people standing across the street with their arms linked. Most of these people run the city.
Very strategic.
Very
Reflections
strategic
on Pine
partners.
was a 5-year thought process. We knew that those people were there, but before this was
A planning meeting.
This was the planning meeting. So these people are our stakeholders. So when we announced that we were doing this, we said we have the support of.
Right.
So we created a united front. Where if you were going to challenge us, you're challenging all of them.
Right.
The city, the universities, the colleges, the chief of police, the county, the city, the mayor, Board of Education.
Right. So that dampens a lot of
Exactly.
adversaries.
So that is, yes. So you challenge us, you challenge them.
Right. We kind of made it the cool thing to do. You got to be on board, and if you're not,
which you mentioned the institutions involved, but I see a very mixed race
Exactly.
of advocates.
Yes.
In this picture, and again, they can come if the audience wants to view these website, they can go to, correct me if I'm wrong, www.en.
ES.
I'm sorry.
ES.
I blew it.
Eastern Shore.
Eastern Shore. www.esnc Cambridge CAMBRIDGE MD for Maryland MD.com.
That's correct. So yeah, we've been pretty blessed to not have to deal face to face with our adversaries. They speak up online, and sometimes we ignore it, and sometimes we address it. It just depends on how loud the voice is and how wrong the voice might be.
But regardless of your message, and whether you like us or love us, there's always an invitation to come and meet with us and talk, because we want everyone to feel safe, or we want to create safe environments where people can be expressive about how they feel.
Right.
Because we might not necessarily like what you say, but we definitely want to help talk through this with you. Because a lot of the information and stuff that people have has festered so long that they've retold the story to themselves internally.
Right.
But we want to give them the safe space to really talk factually about what happened, and not just about what you've heard or what you've been told.
Right. So that's how we deal with them.
Okay. I think we need to wrap up. We're coming towards the end of our time now.
Yes.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like the audience to know?
Productive confrontation is what I glean from all of this. I've been sitting back, for those who can't see me, smiling. I'm smiling because, one, I'm so proud of Kisha and Dion for what they've done. They weren't born during any of this time that we're talking about, the 1967s, the 50s, 60s. But they have taken this as their personal mission to do something. And it's just those two. They forgot to tell you that they are the two co-founders, and they are the staff, they are the drum majors, they are the foot soldiers. But they have, I call it a God-driven mission, because they have not had the confrontation. I get a lot of their heat, but that's okay. I don't mind. Productive confrontation is what I do all the time, every day. Some of my friends are Muslim, and we have a discussion about Jesus versus Mohammed. They have confronted me about, well, there's more than Gloria Richardson that took the lead in this civil rights movement. Yeah, but this is the one person we're talking about today. One of my city commissioners said that. I forgot to tell you that. That there's more than Gloria Richardson. But we can only do one thing at a time. And then the next time we'll pick up that person. Positive, productive confrontation is what they are doing. And it's important. It's not that we shy away from issues. It's that we confront them positively and productively. If you don't have productive confrontation, I call it chaos, but I can do that because I'm the mayor. I can have a little more latitude in how I speak, but I'm always going to be positive, supportive. They made me who I am today. Kisha and Dion. They try to blame me for their relationship, but I don't accept that. I knew that they had a direction. I'm very proud of them. I'm proud that Kisha Petticolas and Dion Banks are the co-founders of Eastern Shore Network for Change, and I look forward to more productive confrontation, and I know that we have lots more to offer. And I'm just grateful that you all allowed me to come and put my little 2 cents in. And though your audience can't hear me smile, I'm smiling, and I'm very proud of what is going on in the city of Cambridge.
Well, Mayor, thank you. We've been listening today and speaking with Mayor Victoria Jackson-Stanley, Kisha Petticolas. Did I get that right this time? And Mr. Dion Banks. And thank you for coming in and talking about your experience and about your Network for Change. And hope you enjoy your rest of your time here in Ethiopia.
Thank you.
so much
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
us.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Real Talk USA.
It's my house, come on, turn it up.
The hour where the U.S. mission to the African Union comes to you through Afro FM 105.3 to highlight the United States partnership in Africa. Current issues will be discussed. Guests will engage on a variety of topics ranging from politics to jazz. Co-hosted by Eyuel Solomon of Afro FM and Chris Meade of USAU. The show will air every Thursday. Feel free to participate by sending messages to the USAU social media sites www.usau.usmission.gov or www.facebook.com/USAU and follow USAU on twitter.com/USAU.
Just relax. Welcome to my house.
Real Talk USA.
Welcome to my house. It's my house.